to NBC.
Maliki was asking for help with airstrikes in the last few weeks as this was coming, as the ISIS was coming toward this part of Iraq. Why didn't we act then?
For a lot of different reasons, not the least of which is we didn't have operational theater capacity at that point in time, partly because Prime Minister Maliki denied the kind of permissions necessary.
That raises the question, why come to Maliki's rescue now? I mean, isn't he a big part of the problem?
Let me stress, what the United States is doing is about Iraq. It is not about Maliki. And nothing that the president decides to do is going to be focused specifically on Prime Minister Maliki. It is focused on the people of Iraq.
Let's head out now to the White House and White House correspondent Michelle Kaczynski there. You see her there on the lawn. Michelle, what conversations are unfolding there, encouraging Maliki to step down, if any?
Well, that's what people are talking about. I mean, top congressional leaders, some top U.S. officials are saying that that's what they believe needs to happen. From the White House's position, though, you really can't get them to answer the question. They went so far yesterday as to say, obviously not enough has been done by al-Maliki to incorporate all elements of the population within the government. And we've been talking for days about how al-Maliki has alienated Sunnis, kicked people out of some top positions, generally stirred things up, and that's seen as a major contributing factor to what is going on right now. But the White House is not going to stand there and call for regime change. What's going on behind the scenes is a lot of pressure. And, you know, we know that the vice president called al-Maliki yesterday. He talked to not only him, but a top parliamentarian and also the Kurdish president. Talked to all of them about the need for inclusiveness. And we can't emphasize enough how many times the White House talks about this. I mean, it's virtually in every answer to every single question. They say, number one, the best solution to the threat there is an inclusive government, because that provides the framework that minimizes at least the threat. Whether that's too late right now remains to be seen, but clearly the U.S. still wants that kind of government in place, Don.
Michelle Kaczynski at the White House. Michelle, thank you very much. This just into CNN, straight from the Senate floor. Of course, you know, John McCain, the president, rarely see eye to eye on many issues. And of course, on this issue, when it's concerning Iraq, they don't either. Let's listen to John McCain just moments ago on the Senate floor.
In the last couple of weeks. And what has the United States of America done? Today, we see on the front page of the Washington Post, U.S. sees risk in Iraqi airstrikes. The President of the United States goes for fundraising and golfing, and now is fiddling while Iraq burns.
Fiddling while Iraq burns. Perfect time to bring in Indiana Senator Dan Coats, Republican Senator. Dan, what do you make of John McCain's comments just moments ago?
Well, I think what we've seen here in the last few weeks, in fact, last several months, is a lack of decisive leadership, either from our president or from President Maliki. Clearly, some blame falls to Maliki in terms of his inability to do what I think everyone knew he needed to do, but also are ignoring the situation to the point where, even though we probably knew this was, as the Secretary of Defense admitted to me yesterday in a hearing, knew that something like this was going to happen, and we really didn't have a plan in place in terms of dealing with it. Now, it's a complex issue, and I don't have the solution to this, but the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, needs to be, and with his people, needs to be thinking about how do we deal with these situations if it should arise. And they're acting as if this came as a surprise, so we're kind of behind the curve here in terms of knowing what exactly to do. One thing we need is clear announcement of whether we go forward or not go forward, and whether we believe Iraq needs a new leadership, a more inclusive government.
Senator, stand by, because we'll talk more about, you know, the president informing and keeping members of Congress informed. The issue is, you said, you're not sure of what to do. What would you have the president do? A lot of people are criticizing the president, and from the president's side, he's saying, or at least his administration is saying, what are the solutions? You're criticizing us, but there are no solutions. What would you have them do?
Well, I do agree with General Petraeus, who said we shouldn't be Malikis or the Shiite Air Force. It's going to take much more than that to address the situation, given the way it's developed and how they've intruded so far into Iraq and lost that territory. I think at some point here, the moderates, whether they're in Iraq or whether they're in any number of Arab nations, need to step up and say, we will not accept this brutality. And if our leadership from these extremist groups, and if our leadership isn't willing to address this, we can't just simply depend on the United States to come in and bail us out. So I think we could lead potentially that effort among our Western allies and the world through the UN and through our own exhortations to the moderates there that see this perversion of their religion, see the brutality that's taking place. Why aren't they storming the courtyards and storming where people gather in those different states, like we did, like they did with the fall of the Soviet Union, and say, we will not tolerate this. What are the imams? Why aren't they stepping up? Why aren't the tribal leaders stepping up? Why are people saying, we don't want this form of perverted Islam here?
But what does that have to? What does that
effort with
I
Western
understand
nations?
that. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but that, what does that have to do with the United States? My question was, what would you have them do? Because there's also been talk of possible airstrikes. That's one of the possible roads that the U.S. may go down. Do you have an apprehension to that?
Look, the members of 100 members of the Senate and the 435 members of the Congress are not the commander-in-chief, and they're not the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We ought to be looking to their ideas in terms of how we may address this, but ultimately it is the president's decision as to whether or not we get involved. Give us an answer, one way or another, in terms of how we should go forward. We can throw out ideas, but it falls on the president to provide that kind of leadership. The world is looking for it. The Middle East is looking for it. I think the U.S., whether we like it or not, is looked to as someone that can provide some control and security for people around the world. But we need to engage our allies in support of that effort. And if we don't have a president that's willing to take that leading, everybody's just floating out there not knowing what to do.
Dan Coats, Senator Dan Coats, thank you very much. Indiana, appreciate you. In Iraq, all eyes are on the nation's largest refinery. Both terrorist fighters and Iraqi troops claim to have control of the facility, which is a vital economic source for the embattled government. I want to get to Baghdad now. CNN's Nick Robertson. Nick, please give us the latest on this. What's going on?
Don, we got some breaking news out of that refinery. We understand that a ceasefire was arranged between ISIS and the Sunni tribes who are on one side and the government forces on the other side. They were able to get over 200 workers who were inside that refinery. They were able to get them out of the refinery through that ceasefire. But who controls what at the refinery? This refinery's got like a 35-mile perimeter. There are 4 different sections of the refinery. And the best information we can get, putting together everything that we have, is that some of it's under ISIS control and some of it's under Iraqi army control. But more than 200 people got out in the last couple of hours through a ceasefire agreed on the ground there to get those workers out and safe, Don.
Nick Robertson in Iraq. Nick, thank you very much. Appreciate your reporting. Make sure you stay safe. There's still to come here on CNN. Charges of homegrown support of terrorists. One of the very latest from Texas.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And the breaking news concerns Iraq. It is coming from the Pentagon. We'll let Barbara Starr break the story. Barbara, what do you have?
Good morning, Don. This will await a final decision by President Obama, but the Pentagon at this hour is now prepared to send 100 U.S. ground troops, military advisors to Iraq. Several U.S. officials are telling me it does await a final decision by President Obama. That decision could come as soon as today, we are told. 100 military advisors to Iraq. They will be Green Berets, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs. If approved, they will deploy to the headquarters of Iraqi Army brigades around the country, around Iraq. They will advise Iraqi forces, but they have an additional job. They will also collect intelligence on the location and disposition of ISIS forces, the militants that both the Iraqis and the U.S. want to see out of the fight in Iraq. Don, I think what's so significant here for the military, for the Pentagon, is, the president has said no U.S. ground forces in Iraq. But these guys, these 100 special forces, They are always prepared for combat. I don't know a single member of the Special Forces that isn't. So when they go to these brigade locations around Iraq, they certainly may not be on the very front line of combat, but they will be close to the unrest, and they will be in a position of some security concern, many U.S. officials believe. But that is where we are today. An announcement could come from the White House as soon as today. But this is the option we believe the Pentagon certainly is preparing for, and the one that the president is considering.
Barbara, the question is, does the White House appear? I guess it does. I don't want to read too much into this, but, you know, the distinction between ground troops and combat troops. But do they seem to be backing off of their initial assertion that there would be no ground troops sent to Iraq for this particular conflict?
I think that's a really good point to sort of expand on a bit here, Don. You know, the president has made it very clear the U.S. is not going back into ground combat in Iraq in a significant way. The kinds of troops and formations and weaponry that we saw over the years of the war in Iraq that the U.S. pulled out of in December 2011. But, I mean, and here's a big but, the U.S. has been out of Iraq since 2011. Now, very small group, but they are special forces on the ground. They will be at brigade headquarters, advising Iraqi troops, but also gathering intelligence. I think we will have to see what their exact orders are, so to speak, which has not come out yet publicly. But I can tell you, I've spoken to a number of sources who say, look, special forces, they are always prepared. They always know that combat can come to them. If you are in an Iraqi brigade headquarters somewhere in northern Iraq, you may not technically be in combat, but if an artillery shell comes your way, you're in combat. So this is a very sensitive situation at the moment.
The breaking news from our Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, it's showing that this appears to be escalating when it comes to this conflict in Iraq now. Barbara Starr is reporting that the Pentagon is prepared to send 100 special forces, military advisors to Iraq. That's if the Obama administration, if President Obama signs off on it, Green Berets, Army Rangers, and Navy SEALs. Barbara, if you get more information, we'll get back to you. Thank you very much for that.